many of them devastated. Israeli bombardment has leveled some entire neighborhoods. The government estimates losses amount to about $20 billion. It still hasn't been able to address the reconstruction bill of the last war in 2024. The World Bank says the cost of the reconstruction amounted to $11 billion. Government data shows since the latest hostilities began, more than 68,000 housing units have been destroyed or damaged. But that figure doesn't cover the past months when Israel significantly escalated its strikes. Many villages are now uninhabitable. There's no water, no electricity, no telecommunication network. More than 60 hospitals and other medical facilities damaged or shut down. The full economic impact of the war has yet to be assessed, but officials believe it will contract by up to 10%. And in southern Lebanon, it's been pushed to near total collapse. Businesses have been destroyed. Many worked in the agricultural sector. It made up 80% of the local GDP. It's estimated that 25% of all cultivated land nationwide has been damaged, burned, or is inaccessible because of the Israeli occupation. Nearly 77% of farmers in the region have been displaced. The conflict has caused repeated mass displacements in the south, which the United Nations says has made it even more difficult for people and authorities to cope. Hundreds of thousands lack food, with prices of water, fuel, and electricity up by more than 30%. Schools are now shelters for the displaced, affecting education. The United Nations more than doubled its appeal for donations for Lebanon, requesting nearly $640 million over 6 months. It has only received roughly $186 million. Sana Khuder, Al Jazeera, Tyre, Southern Lebanon.
Yossi Mekelberg joins us, Senior Consulting Fellow of the Middle East North Africa Program at Chatham House. You're joining us from London. Yossi, give us your vision of what's happening right now between the United States and Israel, because it appears that their interests diverge very much so at this point, and it appears that they are on a collision course. Tell us how you see it.
I fully think that both President Trump and Vice President Vance were not mincing their words in the last few days. They basically blame Netanyahu of derailing, of deliberately undermining the MOU between the United States and Iran. They also argue, and this is probably with much justification, though this is the case for years, definitely in the last 2.5 years, of Israel using disproportionate military force, and the only course of action it knows is using military forces. And in this case, they don't see where it leads politically. What they conveniently forget is that they were very much part of it throughout this time, only now realize, because it's so urgent for the United States to open the Strait of Hormuz, that they probably should have realized it a long time ago. Made its point, Israel was not part of this agreement. We have these concerns vis-à-vis Hezbollah and Iran's involvement, and in Lebanon, take it into account and take us seriously, because we still keep fighting. And maybe the way that Netanyahu did with Obama, for instance, in the past, try to see if public opinion in the United States would be on his side, which I have very, very strong doubts about this. But the worst case scenario from Israel point of view is Netanyahu, just also because of electioneering consideration, might decide just to go solo and decide all the way and continue the war, completely ignore what public opinion in the United States, what President Trump says, and continue the war, which of course it's an extremely risky scenario for Israel, with very heavy price for Lebanese people.
Do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu really can afford to do that? Because we've seen spats, yes we have. We've seen spats between the US and Israel, but we've never seen Netanyahu go it alone in total defiance of United States, will or the United States vision for what needs to happen?
One of the problems that too much of this stuff is in public on both sides. And this is a problem. Probably this discussion, and in the past it used to be behind closed doors. In the Trump era and in Netanyahu's later years, which it's everything in public and everything is about talking to their own constituency. When one is pressure in the United States a midterm election, and Netanyahu is 2-3 months before general election, for him are really crucial to do much with his corruption trial. What Netanyahu can do is very different what Israel can afford. Israel can't afford this patch with the United States, not after its credibility internationally. It's such low after it lost most of its friends in the international community. So Israel can. What Netanyahu does to serve his own interest can be separate to what is good for Israel.
Yossi Mekelberg joining us from London. You're Senior Consulting Fellow of the Middle East and North Africa Program at Chatham House. Thank you very much for joining us on the Al Jazeera News Hour. I want to show our viewers at this point a live look at commercial traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. So look at what's in the center of your screen. This is the waterway that we call the Strait of Hormuz, and that narrowest point, 20, 30 kilometers, all of that is running just south of Iran's coast. And you understand the geography of this. This is what has given Iran such tremendous leverage around this very narrow waterway since the beginning of the war. Now the green dots, the red dots, or the orange dots are all traffic. And what we've seen since the beginning of the war and the closure of the strait is that the ships have been on either side of the strait, but not passing through, or barely passing through. So that's a live look at the map. Bringing in now Mr. Alexander Hudishtanu, is a military defense analyst and retired Romanian Navy officer. You're in Doha, sir. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard has just gone back to the tactic that it discovered early in the war. They're using, once again, their main source of leverage.
Indeed, they do, and I would dare to say they haven't discovered this tactic recently. We have seen at play strategic abuse of maritime security also in Bab el Mandeb for 2 years before, and that was a qualitative shift in how state or non-state actors actually look at gaining other type of strategic or political objectives. So it's not something new. It's a model I think that Iran developed in time, has been applied as a model in Bab el Mandeb, and now full force in Strait of Hormuz. But this is exactly a point that I would like to make here. So there is a point I would like to make here. Iran has discovered the power of the Strait of Hormuz in full force now, but at the same time might risk overplaying its hand. Why? In essence, I see two basic scenarios for the Strait of Hormuz going forward. Either Iran uses it as a deterrent means and tries to rehabilitate its image in the international system, obtain those 300 billion reconstruction funds, assets unfrozen, and so on, or continue this, what is basically an extortion scheme, trying to legalize it and extort and extract funds. But by doing so, it becomes a transactional pattern for the Strait of Hormuz rather than a deterrent pattern. And while companies can comply with that in terms of taxation, the status of Iran in the international stage will decrease consistently to the pariah state, to a state that nations will not want to deal with, and increases the risk for tit for tat for Iranian shipping and for Iranian ships in the international supply chain. So now Iran probably it's unclear of what it wants to do, or I would like to say it tries to actually chase two rabbits, but will risk catching none in the end, because that's how the saying goes. So it really has to clarify in the next 60 days what it wants to do with the Strait of Hormuz. Either becomes a deterrence and rehabilitation tool, or it becomes a money extraction scheme, and then the rehabilitation of Iran in the international stage will be severely damaged.
And just briefly, how do you expect the U.S. to respond to this new closure of the strait by the Revolutionary Guard?
I think we've seen U.S. Giving a yard in this discussion and accepting this format of discussion that Iran has pushed for a long while. So while U.S. has given a yard, we see Iran again on maximalist positions and trying to push its hand. The spoiler here being this asymmetry of relationship between U.S. Israel versus Tehran versus Iran Hezbollah. So I'm pretty sure U.S. will wait. We've seen that comment from CENTCOM trying to reassure that traffic is still open, ships are still passing. So I'm pretty sure U.S. will wait and see if Iran is coming through with this closure for even for a longer time. Because as we've seen before, while Iran has abused the Strait of Hormuz from the very moment of from the onset of the war, U.S. has waited for a long time until it installed its own blockade on Iranian shipping and Iranian ports. So I would dare to say the same pattern might happen here in case Iran is continuing to consistently close the Strait of Hormuz.
Alexander Hudishtanu, military defense analyst, retired Romanian Navy officer, joining us from Doha this hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And bringing in now Mohammed El Masri from Minneapolis. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Bringing in Mohammed El Masri from Minneapolis, professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Professor El Masri, good to have you back on the program. I'd like, as we close this news hour, or get ready to close this news hour, I would like your assessment on where we are right now with these negotiations. There have been so many moving parts, and it seems that the Iranians have decided to come to the talks. Now, remember, Professor, that 24 hours ago, even 12 hours ago, they were saying there's no point for us to come. There's nothing for us to do, because first we want the MOU, the agreement, to be enforced. It seems they've changed their tactic considerably, and they're saying, actually, okay, we're going to come. We're going to come to enforce, to force the U.S. to comply with this agreement. What do you make of the play here, the tactic?
Well, I don't think anything has changed fundamentally in the Iranian position or posture. My sense is that they're going to remain committed to Lebanon being included before anything moves forward. I think their credibility in many ways is on the line. And as you all have been reporting, Cyril, Lebanon was mentioned in Article 1 of the MOU, and it was actually mentioned 3 times. I went back to the MOU this morning. Lebanon was mentioned 3 times in that article, that first article. And in one instance, it talks about the territorial integrity of Lebanon. So I'm guessing that the Iranians were talking with the Americans not only about a ceasefire, not only about Israel stopping its bombardment of Lebanon, but also about an Israeli withdrawal. Whether that's a complete withdrawal or a partial withdrawal, I don't know. But when we start talking about territorial integrity, we're talking about the Israeli occupation. I think this is a serious issue for the Iranians. I don't think they're going to relent. Their credibility is at stake. And also, I think they view this as a test of whether or not the U.S. is serious and whether or not the U.S. is actually willing to use its leverage over Israel.
Professor Mohammed El Masri joining us from Minneapolis at of the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Professor, thank you very much for joining us on the News Hour. I want to bring in now Al Jazeera's diplomatic editor, James Bays. James, you have covered all the significant diplomatic negotiations, significant diplomatic moves of the last few decades. I mean, if it has been negotiated this century, essentially, you've covered it. How does this differ from what you've seen before?
There's a lot of back and forth in diplomacy, but there is so much at stake this time around. We've been waiting for the last couple of days for the talks to start, but they are going to start, and they are completely different talks from the ones we were originally planning to cover. We're going to have, it seems, J.D. Vance on the US side, the US Vice President, Parliamentary Speaker Gallagher on the Iranian side, but the agenda is a different one. It's no longer the agenda of moving on from the Memorandum of Understanding, it's the agenda of saving the Memorandum of Understanding, because that interim deal that was signed at Versailles late on Wednesday night by the Iranian president in Tehran and Donald Trump in Versailles, that is now at risk. The Iranians, first, because of the Israeli bombardment, the breach of the MOI by Israel, bombardment of southern Lebanon, their first thing to do was say, we're not coming. Now they've decided to come, but instead to block the Strait of Hormuz. Now that was the big achievement of the memorandum of understanding. It was a ceasefire in return for the Strait of Hormuz being open. That achievement is gone for now.
We heard the US Vice President, didn't we? J.D. Vance, you alerted us to this. J.D. Vance was saying, look, great, it's great because Hormuz is reopened and oil is flowing through and trade is restarting. He said this pretty much at the same time that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard shut it down again.
Yeah, he said there's only a few problems, nothing to no real worry because the Strait of Hormuz is still open. The Strait of Hormuz is not now open. The Iranian side have decided to use one of their biggest cards because I think they feel this is a moment when they have some leverage after Donald Trump has fully embraced this memorandum of understanding and Israel is so blatantly breaching it. They believe if they put on the pressure, then the US can put on the pressure with Israel. Now, that's a question because we've seen President Trump, Vice President Vance say some of the strongest words that we've heard in recent times about Israel, and Israel has breached this. Is Israel now going to follow through, or does it need action